I'm not MAGA, please don't scroll. I have a moral compass and a soul. On today's Sunday sermon, release the files. Protect the kids. Release the files. For all the internet that is abuzz about the supposed impending rapture, every single one of those people that claims they're going to be raptured and are so excited about their fate support Donald Trump. This perversion of the Christian faith over the past 100 years or so, if not longer, has been orchestrated and perpetrated by those whose teachings are outright antithetical, that means opposite MAGA, antithetical of Jesus' teachings. So I'm not so sure why all these people are so stoked for their alleged impending rapture. When you support someone like Donald Trump, where do you think you're going to go? Release the files. Protect the kids. And have a blessed day.
Top Trump official accepted a $50,000 bribe from the FBI. They caught it on tape, and Trump swept it under the rug. That, according to a new story from MSNBC, reported by others, that last year Tom Homan, who now is Trump's border czar, previously Homan was head of ICE during Trump's first term, reportedly was approaching people and saying, hey, if you'd like to get federal contracts, give me money, and I'll give you federal contracts. That would be a bribe that would be illegal. Well, the FBI got wind of it last year and approached him, pretending to be businessmen with contracts. Allegedly, he accepted a $50,000 bribe from the FBI. Allegedly, the FBI got it on tape, and the case sat there because pretty much it was the end of the year. Trump takes over, doesn't go anywhere. Trump throws it out, says, there's no proof. There's video. There's no proof. It was the deep state. He's a good guy. Well, here's the thing. Good guys don't accept $50,000 bribes in exchange for getting federal contracts. If it's not true, there's video, and they've confirmed that. I mean, we know there's video. Release the video. The video will show that he's an innocent guy who was set up. This is sick, but this is, again, what we're dealing with, the most corrupt administration in American history.
Regarding everything that's going on with Disney, ABC, Jimmy Kimmel's suspension, and free speech essentially being under attack, I thought I would read to you J.D. Vance's own words. I had to print out a copy just to make sure I had the quote correct. Under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square. Now, that was just back in February, and oh, have things changed so much. Your freedom of speech, my freedom of speech, our nation's right to say what we want is now under attack. And are people going to jail? No. Are you free from consequences? No. But we are now having basically the government coming in and trying to control what the media can say, what people like Jimmy Kimmel, a comedian, can say because they are offended. I thought we were trying to bring back comedy. Isn't that what Musk said? Oh, why are we so down on comedy? And then this administration is going after people like Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel and threatening the mergers of other companies if they don't act against these people. We are at a state where companies like ABC and Disney are bending the knee and going after their own people to help stay out of the threat and the crosshairs of Donald Trump. This administration does not care about your right to say what you want. They claim to be the party of free speech, but as soon as they have the ability to go after you for it, they are. So these words from February ring so hollow here in September.
Jimmy Kimmel was bullied off the air by a man that lies about his height and weight. Meanwhile, Fox News is able to call for just casually talk about, hey, yeah, let's just kill off the homeless.
And the homeless population, a lot of them don't want to take the programs. A lot of them don't want to get the help that is necessary. You can't give them a choice. Either you take the resources that we're going to give you, or you decide that you're going to be locked up in jail. That's the way it has to be now.
Or involuntary lethal injection or something. Just kill them.
Yeah, Brian, why did it have to get to this point?
Right.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no big deal. We're just going to kill people. Why did it get to this point that we're forced to kill these poor homeless people? Because, oh my God, they're such an inconvenience for us.
So inconvenient.
And I guarantee you, over 95% of the people that watch Fox identify as Christians.
Donald Trump just can't handle it. California Governor Gavin Newsom is so efficiently cleaning Donald Trump's clock that Trump's United States Attorney in the Central District of California, get this, called the Secret Service on California Governor Gavin Newsom. That's how much Newsom is living rent-free in Donald Trump's head. Let me show you what went down, and let me show you the powerful press conference that California Governor Gavin Newsom had in Los Angeles over the weekend as the Trump regime was literally calling the Secret Service on Governor Newsom. So California Governor Gavin Newsom posted this. It was a repost of the White House imagining what the UFC fight's going to look like on the White House lawn. It's an AI rendering of a massive stadium on the White House lawn where, again, a UFC fight is going to take place pretty soon at the White House, to which Governor Newsom says, thank God they are focused on the priorities of all Americans. Yep, golden ballrooms that are 90,000 square.
Is Fox News going to control TikTok under the sale deal? Maybe. There's a report today from CNBC and others that the Murdochs are being discussed as possible partners. Fox News might be a possible partner, but the deal is not done yet. This means somebody's bringing it up. Maybe Trump is bringing it up. Maybe the Murdochs are actually negotiating, but the negotiation hasn't gone through yet. But this is really scary because a lot of people have been saying they're very worried about this deal to sell TikTok because who's taking it over? Currently, we know that a group of MAGA activist businesses are the ones who basically will take control of TikTok. TikTok US, I should add, not TikTok International. TikTok US. Then there's the algorithm, which the White House is saying will be controlled by America. Nobody knows what that means. They didn't expand on it. Meaning, does that mean the American government's controlling it? Does that mean Americans versus Chinese will control it? So maybe just American companies? We don't know. But this is incredibly scary, particularly because now you've got Donald Trump trying to basically eliminate the media in America, wipe out independent media. The idea that he, the U.S. government, or his activist friends are going to control something as important as TikTok. Look what Elon Musk did to Twitter. He destroyed Twitter. He let a bunch of white supremacists and others come in, has been, banned journalists, all sorts of things. It's the same thing. Let's hope the same thing is not going to happen to TikTok. This is a very scary development because you know what Trump's going to do if he takes over.
President Trump could destroy capitalism. Capitalism depends on the rule of law to function. As President Trump demolishes the American constitutional system in pursuit of authoritarian power, he's also laying the groundwork for the ultimate end of capitalism itself. Here's how. Corporations do not exist in the wild. There are no corporations happening in nature. Corporations, except for maybe the Catholic Church, did not exist 500 years ago. This is because the corporation is a legal construct. Corporations exist on paper. Corporations and the rich people who operate them and collect the wealth generated by their workers are completely dependent on a functioning legal system. Without the laws that create and govern their behavior, without legal ownership, corporations cannot exist. When the President and the Supreme Court and Congress trample over the law, perverting our Constitution to say that tyrannical authoritarian power is allowed, the rule of law loses meaning. If the laws that govern American society are meaningless, so too are the laws that govern modern American corporations. Property rights are the basis for capitalism. If property rights become meaningless because the law is meaningless, the entire capitalist system is put at risk. Business law professor Robert Byrd explores this topic in depth, first noting how Trump's tariffs instantly evaporated $4 trillion in value from the U.S. stock market. He points out how selective law enforcement creates huge market disruptions and rattles investors. Citing a recent study by the World Justice Project, he writes, "The rule of law in the U.S., the most economically powerful nation in the world, is now weaker than the rule of law in Uruguay, Singapore, Latvia, and over 20 other countries." Byrd's main point is that capitalism can only function when the law is enforced fairly and predictably. He writes that inconsistent government enforcement of the law undermines private property rights, opens the door to corruption, and hampers businesses' ability to compete, plan, or generate profits. So, from a business perspective, Trump's lawlessness is dangerous to profits. But the danger is even greater than Professor Byrd describes. Trump's lawlessness presents an existential threat to all of capitalism. Corporations are a relatively recent phenomenon. As Noam Chomsky points out in How the World Works, corporate rights were created, mostly by the judicial system, in the late 1800s, and were dramatically expanded early in the 20th century. Corporations all have state charters, which can be nullified and rewritten. Corporations cannot exist without enforcement of legal contracts. Further, the idea that corporations should only be run for the benefit of shareholders dates to a newspaper column published in 1970. It's hardly what you would call a foundational principle of modern business. If the President and Supreme Court say that authoritarianism is legal, despite the fact that ending authoritarian tyranny was the animating concept behind both the founding of this nation and the writing of the U.S. Constitution, the legal system is a fraud. If rule of law means nothing, legal ownership of corporations also means nothing. If elections are meaningless, so too are the laws made by unelected government. And so are the claims of ownership made by shareholders. If our president, our Congress, our Supreme Court won't follow the law, why should we? If the basis for capitalist ownership is a fraudulent legal system, capitalist ownership is also fraudulent. If the workers create all of the value in a corporation, then workers should have control over all decisions. That is workplace democracy. What do we do with the profits? What do we produce? How much do we pay our workers? How many hours do they work? Making these decisions is democracy in the workplace. We should have that power. What happens in this country? Who do we go to war with? Do we allow American tax money to pay for genocide? How much tax should the rich pay? Having a say in those questions is democracy in government. Legally, constitutionally, we should have that power too. In my next post, Seizing the Means of Production. What does that mean? How can it be done? Until then, please give a like, follow, favorite, repost, and follow my Linktree to sign up for my Substack. Let's make them pay.
I need you to do something for me right now. Take a breath, sit still, and give me 10 minutes. 10 minutes to really absorb what's going on in this country. Because if we keep scrolling past headlines, we miss the pattern staring us in the face. Donald Trump is using lawsuits, and even just the threat of lawsuits, to silence America. We're not living in a democracy anymore. We're living in a system where one man uses the courts as his personal weapon, where lawsuits replace laws and intimidation replaces debate. This is authoritarianism, and the people pretending otherwise are delusional. Let's start with the press, the front line of the First Amendment. In late 2024, Trump sued ABC News for misquoting him. They didn't fight. They paid him $15 million to settle. Then he went after CBS and its parent company, Paramount, over a 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris. He claimed they deceptively edited her answers to make her look better. Trump demanded billions. Paramount settled in July, paying him $16 million rather than spend years in court. And just days ago, Trump went even bigger. A $15 billion defamation lawsuit against the New York Times and Penguin Random House. What set him off? Their reporting and the book, Lucky Loser, a book that said his fortune was built on shady tax schemes, that described Trump Tower as tacky and stale when Mark Burnett came scouting for The Apprentice, and that Burnett had to reinvent Trump to make him look like a success. Well, Trump did declare bankruptcy 6 times. That's not defamation. Those are the facts. The lawsuit didn't stop there. He added another $10 billion claim over false and defamatory reporting. The book Lucky Loser cited John Kelly, Trump's own former chief of staff, describing Trump as admiring Hitler. It also raised questions about mafia ties, money laundering, and editorials that called Trump unfit for office. That's what this lawsuit is really about. Not correcting the record, but punishing the press for telling truths he doesn't want the public to hear. Think about what that means. If giants like the New York Times and ABC can be dragged into billion-dollar lawsuits, what chance does your local paper have? One threatening letter could wipe them out. So, editors pull stories, reporters back off, and the truth never sees the light of day. That is how free speech dies, headline by headline until silence is the norm. And it's not just the press. Trump has gone after universities too. At Harvard, the administration launched a review in March of more than $8.7 billion in federal grants and contracts. When Harvard refused to let the government dictate hiring, admissions, and research, Trump froze $2.2 billion of that funding. Harvard fought back, sued, and this month, a federal judge struck the freeze down as unconstitutional. So on the big stuff, Harvard resisted. But even Harvard has bent the knee. In July, they turned over thousands of employee verification forms. They refused when it came to student jobs, but still, they gave ground. They've resisted where they could, but the cracks are showing. Harvard is the richest university in the nation, sitting on an endowment of more than $50 billion. If even Harvard can be bent under pressure, what chance does anyone else have? In March, Columbia University lost $400 million in federal research money. To get it back, they agreed to all of Trump's demands. They changed their disciplinary process, hired campus security with arrest powers, banned masks at protests, handed over admissions data, and even let the government appoint an overseer for Middle Eastern studies. By July, the university paid the federal government $220 million to settle investigations, to just make it stop. As part of that deal, they adopted Trump's definition of anti-Semitism, disciplined more than 70 students for protesting, and agreed to federal monitoring of their policies. The backlash was so strong, their president resigned. So Harvard fought, though it bent under pressure. Columbia caved, and the government walked right in the front door. That's not academic freedom, that's forced compliance. And then there are the individuals, ordinary people punished for speaking out. After Charlie Kirk's murder last week, journalists, professors, even lawyers were suspended or fired over posts that criticized him. Some for just repeating Kirk's own words. Lawyers aren't safe either. Perkins Coie, one of the biggest firms in the country, fired a lawyer effective immediately for posting criticism of Charlie Kirk after his death. The firm said his post fell far short of expectations. That lawyer didn't issue a threat. He didn't call for violence. He just spoke his mind, and he lost his job. Comedians aren't safe either. Stephen Colbert's Late Show was canceled by CBS in July. The official excuse was money, falling ad revenue, rising costs. It was the #1 late-night show in the country. But just days earlier, Colbert had blasted CBS's parent company Paramount for paying Trump $16 million to settle that 60 Minutes lawsuit about Kamala Harris. Colbert called it a political payoff because Paramount was begging regulators to approve an $8.4 billion merger. Days later, his show was Trump cheered it on, and the message became crystal clear. Cross him, and you're gonna pay. This week, Jimmy Kimmel's show was suspended indefinitely after he called out MAGA efforts to spin Charlie Kirk's murder for political points. Nexstar Media Group, which owns dozens of ABC stations, threatened to drop the show. Then Trump's ally at the FCC, Brendan Carr, turned up the heat, warning those stations could lose their licenses. Within days, ABC pulled Kimmel off the air. Not because his words were false, but because they were true, and they embarrassed the wrong people. When Trump sues, companies say, it's too expensive, the legal bills will ruin us. But here's my message, the cost of fighting is worth it. Harvard putting more than $8.7 billion in funding on the line? That's nothing compared to losing academic freedom. The New York Times spending millions on lawyers? That's nothing compared to losing a free press. One journalist losing their job is terrible, but a country where no journalists dare to tell the truth? That's not a country I want to live in. Democracy, it's expensive, but the cost of silence is authoritarianism. And once silence takes hold, it doesn't let go. If we let fear of one man's lawyers muzzle a nation, then the Republic has already surrendered, and history will not forgive us for trading freedom for silence. If we let this stand, we're not citizens anymore. We're subjects. And I refuse to be ruled by a con man with a stack of lawsuits. The question isn't whether Trump will keep suing. He will. The question is whether the media conglomerates, the universities, the law firms, and the billionaires who can actually fight him will keep surrendering to him. Because the only thing more dangerous than Trump's lawsuits is their silence. Thanks for sticking with me. We need to know what we're dealing with.
One of the things that is bothering me the most about what's happening in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's murder is that all the responsible fact-checking, hey, what really happened here, seems to be being pursued by the left, where the right has already jumped to conclusions and used this as a weapon. So what I want to do is, so I want to invite everybody to listen to this. MAGA people, anybody who's not MAGA, okay, so the majority of the country, to listen to this timeline and these facts, all right? I'm not painting a picture. It's not even a working theory. This is, as I'm working towards a working theory, I'm simply accumulating information. So I'm going to lay it out for you, okay? There was polling done in early 2025 that basically said that the younger conservatives in this country, right, were starting to turn away from supporting Israel, from U.S. support of Israel. All right, why does that matter? Because that's Charlie Kirk's demographic. That's who he was talking to. That's whose ear he had. So it will come as no surprise if you followed Charlie Kirk for any period of time. He was very pro-Israel for a very long time. And then somewhere towards maybe a couple of months ago, you started to see that sort of shift, right? It's principally, he went on Tucker Carlson's show, I want to say it was like 21 July, right? And of course, Tucker Carlson is not a fan of the pro-Israel nonsense, okay? So, and Charlie Kirk was in agreement with him about many of his talking points, all right? So this would send up a red flag that like, hey, this very influential influencer, the person who controls more of the youth conservative vote in America than pretty much anybody else as an influencer, is potentially going to turn away from Israel. So this would be a good time to reference back to, there was an article that came out, I think on 12 September in a paper called The Gray Zone. And this is one of Kirk's friends that basically comes out and says, yeah, Netanyahu had offered this. Now, Netanyahu has denied this, but that Netanyahu had offered a huge financial infusion to TPUSA. And Charlie Kirk said, no thanks. He didn't want the money because he felt like it was Israel attempting to basically coerce him to continue to be a pro-Israel mouthpiece. Now, in the 2 weeks before Charlie Kirk's death, and Netanyahu did confirm this, he offered Charlie Kirk a trip to come to Israel. And Charlie Kirk said, no thanks, I don't want to go. And again, and this is supposedly, because it's printed in a lot of places, but that Charlie Kirk had confided to friends near him that he feared retribution from these Israeli sources if he sort of began to turn away from them, okay? And again, I want to say, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just laying out facts. You guys connect the dots for yourself. In the time between when Charlie Kirk did the Tucker Carlson show and when he was killed on September 10th, he didn't do any outdoor public speaking events, okay? He did one event where he was speaking in like the UK at some Oxford event, indoors. He also did another event where he was speaking to like pastors and whatnot, again, indoors. All right, so this event where he was speaking when he was shot and murdered, all right, was on September 10th. It was the first open air event that he had done. Why do I say that? Well, because for me that matters, because if you're, let's just say that you're the person who's saying like, oh, this guy's no longer going to advocate for us, right? You want to be able to take a shot at him in a place where the person can probably get away. Okay. So again, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just laying out facts. Okay. Again, y'all connect the dots. So this was the very first stop in his, I think it was called America Comeback Tour. If I'm wrong, y'all put it in the comments. His very first stop. He was 20 minutes into speaking. He was shot. Okay. Then 48 hours after losing her husband, Erica Kirk comes into public in her full, hair, makeup, right? Wearing all white, and gives that speech. If you haven't seen it, gosh, you're lucky, because I wish I could unsee it. But anyway, so she gives this speech, which a lot of people feel was more like a performance. And as the facts accumulate, I'm sort of leaning that way myself. I know I certainly wouldn't have been able to give that speech 48 hours later. But anyway, so she gives this speech, and instead of unifying, she uses it as an opportunity to rally the base and point fingers at the left, even though it looked very good for the fact that the person who had already been arrested and was in custody came from a MAGA family in Utah. And I'm sure since none of you live under a rock, you all know that the entire Trump regime has basically, they've all just been, they've been out here just absolutely stirring the pot, right? From J.D. Prance, Donald Trump, Stephen Miller, what's the little blonde one, Pam Blondie, all of them, okay? Stirring the pot, basically pointing the finger at the left, even though there is absolutely no evidence to tie this individual to the left. And even if there were, it would be one individual, not a collective body of people. Okay. Then in the days following his murder, apparently Erica Kirk and TPUSA engaged in this massive fundraising campaign. Okay. Which that kind of made my hinky meter go off. I don't know about you, but if my husband had just been unalive, first off, I wouldn't be talking to the press, nor doing, mic'd up moments where I'm sharing my final moments with him. And I sure as hell wouldn't be fundraising. But anyway, then just a few days later, 8 days later, okay, she is appointed CEO of Turning Point USA, which is an organization that is completely patriarchal in nature, all right? So that's very strange. And she was universally apparently appointed that. All right. Now, why does that matter? Well, Erica Kirk is currently in the process of finishing her doctorate degree at Liberty University, which is a very, very evangelical, pro-Israel university, okay? Again, I'm not pointing fingers, guys. I'm just laying out facts. If it looks a certain way, then it looks a certain way. Now, they said that it was Charlie's wish that she would succeed him in the event that anything happened to him. So if Charlie's maybe going to go by the wayside, and then we go, okay, well, if we remove Charlie, if that was the problem, if we remove him, and then we have, Erica Kirk, who can, I don't want to say play the role because I don't want to be disrespectful, because I don't really know. None of us really know. We're all just looking, okay? But let's say she's in the bereaved, grieving wife category. That's going to pull on your emotional heartstrings. Come on. I don't care who you are. It does. Unless you're just a monster or something. And of course, that is going to make TPUSA grow. Why does that matter? Because TPUSA is a huge, they really have their, finger on the pulse of the young vote, the Republican vote, okay? Now, of course, Erica Kirk getting her doctorate degree in biblical studies means that she's going to be super pro-Israel, right? No questions asked. You add that to the fuel of the grieving widow, and guess what you get? You get a huge surge in TPUSA growth, okay? Which is exactly what happened. So before Charlie's death, they had a recorded, I think 3,500 between high school and college. And then now, since his shooting, okay, well, I don't want to say shooting, it wasn't a shooting, since his murder, okay? Apparently they've had 56,000 new chapter applicants and inquiries. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all set up yet, because, it takes weeks or months, to set it all up and all the rest. But my point is, look, and you heard what she said, this is my battle cry. You have no idea what you've done, what you've unleashed, blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever. And then now you see this huge surge, right, in these young conservative outlets who will all now, of course, probably take money from these pro-Israel outfits. And that brings me to the fact that they are a 501c, but they are a public, right? What is it? Sorry, hold on. I have it written down. So you can there's two types of 501cs, right? Like a private charity and a public charity. But because they're a public charity, they don't have to disclose their donors. publicly. They don't have to. They have to disclose the amount, but not the individual donors. So they can take money from anybody that they want. And then when you add to that the person who allegedly did this shooting, okay, so he gave a full, according to the FBI, the evidence that they supported, okay, he gave a full confession to his roommate, and then agreed to be taken into custody. And while knowing that he's facing the death penalty, if this charge were to stick, he's not cooperating. That doesn't make sense. Like, why would you, if you were going to be willing to be taken into custody, and then, look, my point is, you would say whatever you needed to say. You would cooperate so that you could plead out, right? You could plead out like, okay, I'm going to take that deal as opposed to having to get the death penalty. None of this really sits right with me. So again, I'm not pointing fingers. So MAGA, if you're watching this, critical thinking is not a skill that only the left has. You guys are allowed to engage in critical thought. I'm just saying, when you add all of this up, it doesn't look great. At the end of the day, look, I just want to know what happened, why he was killed. All right. Because it's wrong. And because if there was somebody involved in this that shouldn't have been involved in this, I feel like he deserves that justice. Even though I did not support anything that he said, and I think he was a vile human being, he still deserves that.